Just tap somebody and say he has power over it all. When we come to John chapter number 11, then we find introduction to three characters, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Now we've heard about Mary and Martha in various books, but this is the first time that we meet Lazarus. And Jesus loves them. As a matter of fact, let me say this. The Bible says that he was close to them. And so if I really have to approach this, I have to approach this from an area of relationship. How many of you know that relationship is important? And I know we got some people who say, I don't need nothing but Jesus and nobody else. But I came to tell you, Jesus had relationship. Jesus had friends. Jesus had people he could talk to. And if you're ever going to accomplish anything in the kingdom, you got to have relationship. Look at somebody and say relationship is important. You're not an island, and you can't do it all by yourself. Each joint supplieth. And so God quit walking around thinking that you don't need nobody but Jesus provides relationship. And so if I approach it from relationship, the Bible says that Jesus is in relationship. He's friends. There's no fly-by-night or ordinary relationship. As a matter of fact, the Greek word for love here is agapeo, which is stronger than agape. In other words, he has a strong love for Mary and Martha and Lazarus. But the conflict is that Lazarus is sick. And they send Jesus a message. Use today's vernacular, they send him an email or a text. They send him, inbox him on Facebook or Twitter. They send Jesus a text, a phone call, and something, and they try to get him from every angle and say, Jesus, your boy, whom you love, is sick. Now notice they said, them who thou lovest. Now, just for information, there's some discrepancy. Some people wonder whether John really wrote the book because the literary style is a little different than Revelation. And some people would say that in this particular aspect, that the disciple whom Jesus loved is named here Lazarus. And so they say if John did not write the book, then maybe Lazarus wrote the book because Lazarus is the one that it said that Jesus loved. But nevertheless, it says Jesus loved Lazarus. But when he gets the message, he stays where he is. I have a problem because in this time, it would seem like that Jesus would come to his friend's rescue. It seemed like Jesus would raise his friend up because that's his boy, that's whom he loves. But how do you stay put when you have the power to help and yet you don't do nothing? Because Jesus did not have to go. All he had to do was speak the word. And Lazarus would have came forth. Lazarus would have got off of his sick bed. But Jesus stayed where he was. Now Jesus says, this sickness is not unto death. It's for God to get the glory. Jesus knew what he was going to do. The problem was they didn't know what Jesus was going to do. And sometimes, have you ever been in a situation where you knew that God was going to do something, but you didn't know what he was going to do? And so imagine them looking outside the window and looking outside the door and say, I'm waiting on Jesus to show up. But Jesus never comes. But here's the key to relationship. According to the author of John, Jesus is about to perform his greatest miracle. If he is going to perform his greatest miracle, why not do it for somebody who he had a relationship with? Because there is nowhere else in the Bible that Jesus did a miracle for that he was close to before the miracle happened. Mary Magdalene, he did the deeds out of her, the demons out of her. However, she followed him after the miracle. This was one that was his friend before the miracle. And yet Jesus knew with relationship that if he was going to do a miracle, it would need to be somebody who he was close to, because he did everything else for strangers. Just look at somebody and say, you are a prime candidate for a miracle, just because you have a relationship. Now, I may not be talking to everybody, because I understand we've been talking about the Ark of the Covenant, and we've been talking about the tabernacle. Jesus does something for Lazarus because of their closeness. But sometimes our relationship with God is still on the outer court. And that's why when we have praise and worship, we need somebody that can take us into the Holy of Holies. Because a lot of times we stay on the outer court and we never get in. But on the other hand, you can't take somebody, Bishop told us that, where you've never been. And if you go and they go too, all of us gonna fall in a ditch, because we're not gonna know what we're doing. And so what happens is Jesus has a relationship with Lazarus, and he stays where he is. He doesn't move. And the text says he waits 2 days, tells his disciples, come on, let's go. They go, and when they get there, Lazarus is dead 4 days already. Martha comes out and says, Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Here's the issue. She said that out of respect. But what she probably really wanted to say was, Jesus, I'm upset with you. Because this was your boy. And our relationship is supposed to be tighter than that. And so, Jesus, how could you let him die when you had the power to raise him up? And don't tell me that there are some things that you go through that you don't have some questions sometimes for God. And so what happens is he says it. And she says it, but Jesus said, your brother will rise again. And then she gets religious on him. She says, I know he'll rise at the last day. In other words, she just was traditional in her religion. And Jesus had to correct her and said, I am the resurrection and the life. In other words, I'm standing right here. And I don't need wait for a last day. I'm right here. I control the first and the last day. And there's nothing that I need. And so he's talking to her. And they send for Sister Mary. Mary comes. She's crying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would still be alive. But when Mary comes, there's some spectators. How many of you know you always got spectators? Because they said Jesus finally made it. Let's see what he's going to do. When Jesus saw Mary weeping, the Bible says he wept too. And then he says, show me where you laid him. He says, show me where you laid him. And he gets there. And after he prays, he says, take away the stone. Now here's where Mary had a problem, because Martha said, Lord, he's been dead 4 days, and by now he stinketh. But Jesus said, take away the stone. Now what happened in Jewish custom is that they did not embalm you after you died. Matter of fact, after you died, they really buried you the same day. And if it was a violent death, they would take the parts of you that were exposed and put them back inside of you and wash you and then wrap you up, because what they were saying was they were preparing you for the resurrection of the last day. And if you were rich, they would put you in a sepulchre, put you on a shelf, and they would put the tomb door, they would put the stone on the sepulchre. And what they would do is they would let you decompose close. And after a period of time, they would reopen the sepulchre and take your bones and put you in a ossuary or a bone box. And after they put you in the bone box, they would put you, take it out and put it somewhere because they were preparing you for the afterlife or the resurrection of the last day. And so she said, Jesus.